On an average night in Seffner, Florida, a 37-year-old man named Jeffrey Bush goes to sleep in his bedroom. At some point before morning, the ground beneath the house dissolves. A sinkhole opens. The floor gives way. Jeffrey Bush drops 20 feet into the earth in seconds. His brother jumps into the hole trying to reach him. A sheriff's deputy pulls the brother back before the collapsing earth takes him too. Jeffrey Bush's body is never recovered. He is still down there. This is not a freak event. It is Florida. Florida receives roughly 1,000 new residents every single day. 22 million people live on a peninsula surrounded by warm ocean water, built on porous limestone bedrock, positioned directly in the path of two opposing sea breezes that collide over the center of the state every summer afternoon with 30,000 amps of electrical discharge. The tourism industry sells sunshine, theme parks, beaches, and retirement communities. What it does not sell is the geological, meteorological, biological, and ecological reality of the place. A convergence of hazards so unusual and so consistent that no other state in the country produces a comparable set of risks in the same geography. Most people who move to Florida or visit it understand that alligators exist and that hurricanes happen. These are the culturally legible dangers, the ones that generate wildlife removal reality shows and cable news tracking maps. They are real. They are also not the primary killers. The ground opens without warning. The afternoon sky delivers fatal voltage on a statistical schedule. The ocean accounts for 30% of the planet's unprovoked shark bites from a single state. And deep in the Everglades, an ecological disaster is unfolding that scientists describe as one of the worst invasive species crises in American history, with no containment strategy that has yet worked. The illusion of safety in Florida is constructed from the state's own familiarity. It is the most visited state in the country. Its dangers are framed as manageable. Watch for alligators near the water. Come inside if there's lightning. Respect hurricane evacuation orders. That framing is accurate as far as it goes. It does not go far enough, and the gap between what Florida's reputation communicates and what Florida's geology, meteorology, and ecology actually produce has cost lives in every county in the state, in every decade of its documented history. The first illusion is that the ground is solid. Florida sits on a foundation of porous limestone, soft, soluble rock that groundwater dissolves over thousands and millions of years. The technical term is karst topography. What it means is that the bedrock beneath the entire state is riddled with caves, tunnels, channels, and voids. When enough limestone dissolves, the surface layer has nothing left to hold it up. The ground collapses. Florida has more sinkholes than any other state in the country, and the U.S. Geological Survey confirms that more property damage from sinkholes occurs in Florida than anywhere else in the United States. The three counties with the highest sinkhole activity, Pasco, Hernando, and Hillsborough, all in the Tampa Bay area, are home to millions of people living directly over the most active dissolution zones in the state. In 1981, a sinkhole in Winter Park grew within days to over 350 feet wide and 75 feet deep, consuming a house, 5 Porsches at a nearby dealership, a community swimming pool, and a section of public road. Today, that hole is a lake. In 2017, a collapse in Land O'Lakes destroyed 2 homes and triggered neighborhood-wide evacuations as the ground continued to shift. In 2024, a sinkhole in The Villages, Florida's sprawling retirement community of over 100,000 residents, buckled a major road. Jeffrey Bush's address, 240 Faithway Drive in Seffner, reopened in 2015 and again in 2023. The ground beneath that lot has still not finished collapsing. The second illusion is that Florida's storms are inconvenient rather than lethal. The corridor between Tampa and Titusville has a name among meteorologists: Lightning Alley. Florida averages 1.2 million cloud-to-ground lightning flashes per year, roughly 3,500 strikes hitting the ground every single day during storm season, and receives more lightning per square mile than any other state in the nation. The physics are straightforward. Florida is a narrow peninsula surrounded by warm water. During summer, the sun heats the land rapidly, pulling in moist air from the Gulf of Mexico on the west and the Atlantic on the east. These two opposing sea breezes push inland and collide over the center of the state every afternoon, forcing warm, humid air upward violently and building thunderstorm cells that can reach 50,000 feet. The resulting lightning discharges at 30,000 amps, 100 million volts, and temperatures reaching 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Since 2006, 94 people have been killed by lightning in Florida alone, more than double the total in the second-ranked state. Florida averages 7 lightning fatalities per year. Lightning kills more Floridians than hurricanes and tornadoes combined. The named storms that dominate cable news for weeks are not the primary weather killer in this state. The anonymous afternoon thunderstorm, the one that rolls in like clockwork around 3 p.m. and barely makes the local news, is. The third illusion is that Florida's wildlife dangers are concentrated and predictable, that alligators are a lake problem, sharks are an ocean problem, and invasive species are an Everglades problem. None of these hazards respects those boundaries. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission receives over 16,000 nuisance alligator complaints every year and employs a statewide network of contracted trappers to remove animals from swimming pools, golf course water hazards, storm drains, drainage ditches, and residential neighborhoods in every one of Florida's 67 counties. Florida is the only place on Earth where American alligators and American crocodiles coexist in the wild, and the Burmese python, established across the southern half of the state in numbers between 100,000 and 300,000, is not contained to the Everglades. Python hunters describe finding snakes coiled beneath boardwalks in state parks, stretched across hiking trails, and curled around the foundations of cabins in the backcountry. One snake removed during the annual Florida Python Challenge measured 17 feet 7 inches. It was caught in a residential neighborhood. Start with the ground, because the ground is the hazard that has no seasonal pattern, no forecast, and no warning system that functions in the critical minutes before collapse. The geological mechanism is well understood. Florida's limestone bedrock formed from the accumulated shells and skeletons of marine organisms over millions of years when the peninsula was submerged beneath a shallow sea. That limestone is soluble. Slightly acidic rainwater percolates through the soil, reaches the rock, and dissolves it slowly and continuously. Underground water moves through the resulting voids, enlarging them over time. The process is invisible at the surface until the void grows large enough that the overlying sediment can no longer bridge it, at which point the surface drops into the cavity below. This happens with little to no warning. The collapse at 240 Faithway Drive in 2013 occurred while Jeffrey Bush slept. His room was simply gone. The geological feedback loop that makes Florida's sinkhole problem accelerating rather than stable is human. Florida adds approximately 1,000 new residents per day, each requiring water pumped from the same underground aquifer that flows through and supports the limestone. More people means more water extracted. More water extracted means faster dissolution of the rock. Faster dissolution means more voids opening beneath more foundations. Researchers at Florida International University have warned that development and construction are increasing the frequency of both sinkholes and ground collapses, that the very act of building Florida's future is undermining the ground it stands on. That is not a metaphor, it is geology. What makes the sinkhole problem uniquely difficult to communicate is its randomness at the human scale. The geological risk can be mapped at the county level, the areas where limestone sits closest to the surface, where the aquifer is most actively dissolving rock. But the timing and precise location of any individual collapse cannot be predicted. A homeowner in Pasco County can live on a lot with no sinkhole activity for 30 years and wake one morning to a crack running across the kitchen floor, a door that no longer closes, a slight depression forming in the backyard. These are the early signs, the slow-motion sinkholes that give warning. Many give none. The distinction between a sinkhole that develops over weeks and one that opens in seconds is not visible in advance. It depends on the geometry of the void below, the thickness of the sediment layer above, and the water pressure in the surrounding rock, variables that no surface inspection can determine. Florida homeowners in high-risk zones often first learn of the danger not from a geological survey, but from their insurance company. Sinkhole coverage is a distinct and expensive add-on to standard homeowners insurance in Florida, and insurers have become increasingly reluctant to offer it in the highest-risk counties. Some homeowners discover their policy does not cover sinkhole damage when they go to file a claim after the floor of their living room has already subsided 6 inches. The lightning problem in Florida is not simply that the state receives more strikes. It is that the storm system producing those strikes operates on a schedule so reliable that it has effectively become invisible, background noise in a state where afternoon thunderstorms are as routine as morning traffic. 85% of lightning victims in Florida are men. The most common activities at the time of a fatal strike are fishing, being at the beach, boating, and working outdoors. In July 2025, a family of 3 was struck by lightning on a Florida beach while sitting under an umbrella. An umbrella provides zero protection from a lightning bolt. Nothing above ground does, except a fully enclosed building or a hard-topped vehicle. Florida school districts have installed lightning detection systems and implemented mandatory shelter protocols because the threat is that consistent and that lethal. Longtime Florida residents follow the survival rule instinctively. If you hear thunder, go inside immediately and stay inside for 30 minutes after the last rumble. Visitors from states where thunderstorms are gentle background noise often find out the hard way that a Florida summer storm is a categorically different event. The clouds build fast enough that a perfectly blue sky can produce a fully formed thunderstorm in under 30 minutes. By the time tourists on the beach hear the first crack of thunder directly overhead, they are already the tallest objects on a flat, open surface next to the largest electrical conductor on Earth. The neurological damage that lightning survivors carry forward is a dimension of the hazard that fatality statistics alone do not capture. Survivors frequently report chronic pain, persistent memory loss, difficulty concentrating, personality changes, and neurological symptoms that can last years or permanently. The lightning bolt itself lasts a fraction of a second, but the current it passes through the body can disrupt the electrical signals that regulate heart rhythm, scramble the neural pathways that govern memory and emotion, and cause internal burns along the path the current traveled. A person who walks away from a near strike or a ground current event may appear uninjured and feel fine in the immediate aftermath, then develop symptoms over the following days and weeks that physicians may not immediately connect to a lightning exposure. The Florida Lightning Safety Initiative has worked to educate medical providers on the long-term symptom profile of lightning injury precisely because the diagnosis is frequently missed. The acute event, the strike itself, is the part of the story that generates a news report. The years of recovery that follow it are not. Florida's coastline presents a different category of biological hazard, one that is concentrated enough to have earned its primary location an official international designation. Florida leads the entire United States in unprovoked shark bites, not occasionally, but every single year. In 2024, the state recorded 14 unprovoked shark bites, exactly half of the country's total of 28. Volusia County, home to Daytona Beach and New Smyrna Beach, is designated by the International Shark Attack File at the University of Florida as the shark bite capital of the world. New Smyrna Beach alone has recorded over 300 shark bites since 1882, averaging 9 per year every year. In 2021, the county recorded 17 bites in a single season. Every type of water user has been bitten here: surfers, swimmers, waders, and people standing in knee-deep water. In July 2025, a 21-year-old visitor from Ohio was bitten on the foot while tossing a football in water that barely reached his knees. These are not deep water encounters with great whites. They are shallow water interactions with blacktip sharks, spinner sharks, and bull sharks that patrol inches from shore, pursuing the dense baitfish schools drawn by nutrient flow from Ponce Inlet. The water is turbid, visibility is poor, and a shark moving at speed through murky water does not distinguish between a mullet and a human foot with any consistency. Florida accounts for roughly 30% of all unprovoked shark bites on the entire planet. Fatal attacks remain rare. The single U.S. shark fatality in 2024 occurred in Hawaii, not Florida. But the concentration is what defines this state's relationship to the hazard. One state, 3 out of every 10 shark bites on Earth. The paradox of New Smyrna Beach is that its global designation as the shark bite capital of the world has become, for some visitors, an attraction rather than a deterrent. The surfing community that dominates the beach is aware of the statistics and accepts them as part of the environment, the same way a mountaineer accepts rockfall risk or a cave diver accepts entanglement risk. But the recreational visitor who arrives from a landlocked state and wades into her knees to cool off on a hot afternoon has made no such calculation. She has not read the International Shark Attack File. She has read the tourism website, which describes the beach as beautiful and family-friendly. The information asymmetry between what the research record shows and what the visitor experience communicates is not meaningfully different at New Smyrna Beach than it is at the Grand Canyon or the Boundary Waters. The managed entry point communicates one thing, the water communicates another, and the water's version is the one that matters. And then there is the danger that operates entirely outside the framework of individual risk, the one that is reshaping an entire ecosystem and has no containment strategy that has yet worked at scale. Burmese pythons arrived in Florida through the exotic pet trade in the 1970s and 1980s, when owners who bought baby snakes and ended up with 12-foot predators released them into the nearest wild area. Hurricane Andrew in 1992 compounded the problem catastrophically when it destroyed a python breeding facility near the Everglades, releasing an unknown number of snakes into the ecosystem. The result has been documented by the U.S. Geological Survey in terms that generated headlines worldwide. In areas where pythons have been established the longest, raccoon populations have declined by 99.3%, opossums by 98.9%, bobcats by 87.5%. Marsh rabbits, cottontail rabbits, and foxes have effectively disappeared from surveyed areas. The pythons have been documented consuming adult white-tailed deer, wading birds, and alligators. They sit at the top of a food chain that has no natural predator in the Western Hemisphere capable of controlling them. A single female lays an average of 70 eggs per clutch. They are nearly invisible in the sawgrass, perfectly camouflaged against a habitat that is functionally identical to their native range in Southeast Asia. Florida now pays professional python hunters through the South Florida Water Management District's Python Elimination Program. The state also runs an annual Florida Python Challenge, a public hunting competition open to registered participants. In the most recent removal season, November 2025 through April 2026, the Conservancy of Southwest Florida removed 177 pythons weighing a combined 8,080 pounds from a single 200 square mile area in Collier County, setting a record as the organization's first 4-ton removal season. Researchers tracked 40 male scout snakes by radiotelemetry during mating season, following them to pregnant females carrying an average of 70 eggs each. 1 in 4 females caught contained the remains of white-tailed deer in their stomachs. Scientists who have spent decades studying the problem say the same thing. These removal efforts have not dented the population. The python crisis is not a future threat. It is a present emergency that is getting worse. What the mammal collapse numbers represent beyond the individual species declines is a cascade that ecologists are only beginning to fully document. The raccoons and opossums that pythons have effectively eliminated from large sections of the Everglades were performing ecosystem functions: seed dispersal, carrion processing, prey-based maintenance for the wading bird populations that define the Everglades visually and ecologically. When those mid-level species disappear, the effects move both up and down the food web in ways that are difficult to predict and impossible to reverse quickly, even if the python population were somehow controlled overnight. The Everglades was already one of the most ecologically stressed systems in North America before the pythons arrived, subject to decades of water management alterations, agricultural runoff, and sea level rise. The python invasion is not a problem added to that stressed system. It is a pressure applied to a system that was already at its limits. Researchers who study the Everglades describe the combined effect as an ecosystem in the process of fundamental reorganization, becoming something different from what it was, in ways that will persist for generations regardless of what management interventions are implemented. The alligator, which everyone pictures when Florida and dangerous appear in the same sentence, is the hazard that Floridians have lived with longest and understand best, and that still produces fatalities with a consistency that reflects the sheer density of overlap between human activity and the animal's range. There are an estimated 1.3 million alligators in Florida, approximately 1 for every 17 residents. They inhabit every one of the state's 67 counties without exception: lakes, rivers, swamps, canals, retention ponds, drainage ditches, golf course water hazards, neighborhood ponds, swimming pools, storm drains, and occasionally garages. From 1948 through 2025, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission recorded 500 unprovoked alligator bites on humans, 32 of them fatal. In June 2016, a 2-year-old named Lane Graves was playing on the shore of the Seven Seas Lagoon at Walt Disney World when an alligator pulled him into the water. His father fought the animal. He could not free the child. Lane's body was recovered nearly a full day later. In May 2025, 61-year-old Cynthia DeKima was killed when an 11-foot 4-inch alligator capsized her canoe on Tiger Creek near Lake Wales and attacked her in the water. In October 2025, 73-year-old Deborah Herndon was found dead at a residential pond behind her home in Palm Harbor, killed by an alligator measuring just 6 feet 8 inches, a 6'8" alligator, barely longer than a person. The 10-year period from 2016 through 2025 produced 116 total unprovoked bites and 10 fatalities, nearly a third of all fatal attacks ever recorded in Florida, concentrated into a single decade. The FWC states it without qualification: every body of fresh water in the state of Florida contains alligators. Every lake, every pond, every canal, every retention basin behind every strip mall and apartment complex. If a body of water exists in Florida, an alligator is in it or passing through it. The behavioral rule that determines whether a Florida alligator becomes dangerous to humans is simple and well documented. A fed alligator is a dangerous alligator. Alligators are naturally wary of humans. That wariness is the product of evolutionary history with a species that, for most of the animal's 80 million year existence, was either absent or represented a genuine threat. A gator that has been fed by humans even once begins to associate human presence with food. That association overrides the natural wariness. The animal approaches rather than retreats. It loses the behavioral buffer that keeps most alligators and most humans in the same geography without lethal outcomes. The FWC's bumper sticker phrase, "a fed gator is a dead gator," is not a moral statement. It is a description of the management process. An alligator that has lost its wariness becomes a nuisance animal that eventually has to be removed and euthanized because relocation does not reset the behavioral conditioning. The people who feed alligators, usually intending no harm and often finding the experience thrilling, are not just putting themselves at risk, they are signing the animal's death warrant. Here is what ties all of this together and what makes Florida genuinely different in character from the other dangerous American landscapes that have generated this series. Most dangerous landscapes operate primarily through invisibility. The hazard cannot be seen until it is too late to respond. The Grand Canyon's heat acts on the body before the victim recognizes what is happening. The Boundary Water's cold water disables muscle coordination before the swimmer realizes they can no longer swim. Florida's hazards are largely visible. The sinkhole problem is documented and mapped. The lightning statistics are published and widely distributed. The shark bite data is maintained by an internationally recognized research institution. The python crisis has generated peer-reviewed science, state hunting programs, and extensive press coverage. The alligator population is managed by a statewide regulatory framework with 16,000 complaint calls per year. Every Florida hazard described in this video is known, measured, and publicly accessible, and yet the deaths continue at their documented rates in every county, in every season, year after year. The reason is not ignorance, it is normalization. 22 million people living inside a convergence of geological, meteorological, and biological hazards develop a functional relationship with those hazards that looks, from the outside, like complacency. Longtime Floridians go inside when they hear thunder. They do not swim in canals. They read the purple flags at the beach. They know which retention ponds to keep dogs away from. That knowledge is real, and it is protective. It is also the product of sustained exposure to an environment that kills people who do not have it, and that kills them in ways that are, individually, almost always preventable, and collectively relentless. Florida is not trying to harm anyone who enters it. It is simply being what it has been for the duration of its human occupation. A peninsula of dissolving limestone positioned in the path of the most electrically active weather system in North America, surrounded by oceans that account for nearly a third of the planet's shark bites, harboring 1.3 million alligators in every body of freshwater, and supporting an invasive reptile population that is consuming the Everglades from the inside with no natural check on its growth. The ground opens when the limestone says it is time. The lightning arrives on the afternoon schedule regardless of who is on the beach. The sharks patrol the same turbid shallows every day. The pythons are in the sawgrass, invisible, multiplying. The alligators are in the water, all of the water. It doesn't care that the brochure called it the Sunshine State. It never did. Subscribe because the wilderness doesn't warn you, and someone should.